Hello and welcome to The Booth, conversation as it should be. I am one of your co-hosts, Matthew Ingham.
And I am your second co-host, Sean Zimney.
Today we're talking about a subject that is very prevalent in today's news, the NFL Anthem protests. And who do we have with us to talk about these things, Sean?
We have two guests, very good friends of ours. One, Will Kuball.
Matthew and Sean, it's a pleasure to be on the bench.
and Dezmond Ward is our second guest.
I'm glad you gave up video. You're a radio guy.
You certainly have a face for radio, I think is what Dezmond was trying to say there.
That's a little more direct.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, we definitely have the faces for radio on the show. Anyway, yes, as Matthew said, we're going to be talking about the protests during the national anthem, specifically the NFL, kneeling during the national anthem, and what our opinions on that are. So the question I'm going to pose to all of you is, what about kneeling as a protest during the national anthem do you agree or disagree with? Because we will have opposing values here as we go around. And just briefly, I'm going to start. I am # take a knee. I'm with them. I am all for taking a knee at the national anthem. There's no part of that process. There's no part of this type of peaceful protest that I am against. And we'll get into specifics as to why, but let's now move on to Matthew. What's your brief starting opinion on this?
Sure. I think the protests are perfectly reasonable. They're exercising their free speech. I think there are better ways in which they could get better results for some of the issues that they are kneeling for. However, I'm not going to knock them for doing what they're doing.
Sure. Will?
Simply, athletes, individuals, American citizens have the right to protest in an age of non-violent and violent protests alike. These individuals peacefully taking a knee, sitting, standing, whatever it is, for a cause far greater than what the cameras are showing. By all means, they should be doing what they're doing.
Sure. Dezmond Ward.
Sure. So I completely agree with everyone at the table. I think that the players definitely have the constitutional rights to protest. It's their First Amendment right to do that. However, and I support them in that, but however, I think that there could be a different, less disrespectful way for that to take place in a different manner. So I support their rights and their abilities to protest, but I feel that they could do it in a more respectful way.
Sure. Wonderful. So as you can see, there is diverse opinions here about this issue. And the biggest thing we're trying to accomplish here is that you see in the media all over now, it's just attacking. This is such a polarizing issue. The biggest thing here we can do is respectfully listen to each other. And the thing I want to pose right here is, Dezmond, you said disrespectful, right? The question I'm asking is that what about it is disrespectful, in that who are they disrespecting by doing this?
Sure. Okay. So I think that the flag definitely, it's a symbol of America, right? It's a symbol of our country.
Yes.
It doesn't symbolize veterans. It doesn't symbolize anything. However, I believe that these veterans and these men of service, that's at the beginning of every national anthem and sporting events, you'll hear, "Please rise, remove your cap," as we honor veterans. Mm-hmm. So I think that in that sense, yes, you are disrespecting veterans and men and women of service.
Okay, but what they're doing, but what have men and women of service has done is fought for our right to do that, right?
100%, yes.
Sure. To me, you're absolutely right that oftentimes they do say that to honor our veterans, but I would say I don't hear that every time. The flag has never stood for veterans.
I told you that.
Yeah.
It stands for the country. I'm not saying that it stands for veterans. Yeah. However, for a couple of reasons, I think maybe you're not hearing it because it's just, subliminal messaging almost. It's not something you focus on. I don't know exactly what you're focusing on either when the national anthem is sung or being played either. You're kind of, your mind is all over the place. You're thinking about the players on the field. You're thinking about this, that, and the next thing.
Sure.
But
well, let me jump in. I think it's interesting though that the focus from the media has been veterans versus athletes, which is just totally wrong in every sense of it, and that the athletes I don't see them as protesting. They're not protesting veterans. They're not protesting the work they did overseas. They're not protesting any of that. They're protesting issues that are just happening in our country, and then the flag is a representation, the most widely known representation of our country. Thus, they are protesting the country itself. We're not standing up for what
protesting what characterizes our country, and our country right now has shown repeatedly that it values black lives less than white, with police brutality or whatever. So the protests started with Colin Kaepernick as a response to police brutality, with the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's interesting because it's kind of evolved. Now NFL players more and more are kneeling, and it seems like it was a response to what President Donald Trump said. So now a lot of it kind of seems like a protest to Donald Trump, to our president, which, like I said, I'm for kneeling. But this issue of not everyone protesting the same thing or being on the same page is what's getting to me. Will, you have an opinion?
I was just going to say, I think Kaepernick's first knee that he took was under Obama's watch.
Yeah. I'm not saying Kaepernick was against Trump. I'm saying some of this has evolved.
I think it's very clear that Kaepernick is against Trump. I was just going to say this demonstration goes a lot further than one individual or really one cause in a series of examples that demonstrate an inequality just in our system, in our country, how it was created. And I think just to go back to the idea that some veterans, which has been clearly made, some veterans are very against what is occurring at these games, but there are some that are for as well. I think we need to look at what patriotism means. Being in our military, our Navy, our Air Force, in a lot of ways embodies what the best of patriotism is. But I think also in a lot of ways patriotism means holding your country to a certain standard. It's not blind patriotism is what I mean. I think you need to be convicting of your country that you love. I know these athletes love their country. They're just holding it accountable right now in a time that our country needs to be held accountable. In the wake of police brutality, in the wake of systemic inequality, hurtful, derogatory comments coming out of not just the White House, but state and local governments as well. So this is so much bigger than just one anthem or one football game. It's really bringing the grievances of a demographic of Americans, whether that be black or financially poor. They're bringing their grievances on the world stage in, like I said, a respectful, peaceful way, which is such a direct foil to what we saw in places like Charlottesville. There's just so much violence in the world right now that I think it's okay to draw a peaceful gaze on issues that matter so much.
So where is it, do you think, that many people, and let's make that clear, that almost many polls say the majority of people disagree with kneeling during the national anthem. So what part of that? Do you think it's just a misunderstanding? Do you think it's a lack of education about what they're protesting? What is it about that? What is it about the issue that makes so many people disagree with it so wholeheartedly?
I think when they look at ceremonies like the national anthem at the beginning of football games, that for them is a time to just focus solely on the flag. And I think seeing athletes, black and white, kneeling in a way is just like a blatant form of disrespect for what that ceremony really is, and that's just honoring and showcasing our flag. But I would also attest that they aren't fully aware of why they are kneeling, which is really what we're discussing today. Many Americans, whether it be education or just their socioeconomic status or what they see every day, I don't think can properly observe the injustices that exist against marginalized individuals, whether that be racially, economically, sexually marginalized individuals, in a time where we have a president that really echoes messages of hatred. So I think that's really difficult.
Sure. Des, you look like you had something you need to say.
Looks can be deceiving.
Looks as in what looks?
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess as far as what I would say in response, completely agree. Completely think that I think the protest is good overall. I think that's what this country is built on, this right that if you don't agree with your government, that you can speak your mind in a peaceful way. However, I feel that there could be a better point in time for this and a better manner for this to take place. 2 weeks ago, the Dallas Cowboys, with the demonstration that they did, as far as they kneeled before the anthem as a group with arms locked, and then they stood for the anthem. I think that's a very respectful alternative.
With arms locked, they stood.
Right, 100%, yeah. I mean, but they still stood and still respected the flag, and they respected, I guess, what this country stands for, but they also knelt and prior to and did that demonstration of, a disdain for this country, or for this,
for the injustice.
The inequality that exists in this country.
Yeah. So would you say that you disagree with them using the national anthem as a platform for their voice?
Right. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Okay, Matthew, did you have something to say?
Well, I guess again, they can do whatever they want. They're allowed to do that. I think my issue comes in that where is the actual actions that are taking place to promote this change that they want? I get that protesting, and whether it's in the streets or on a field like they are, it raises awareness for issues. I get that. But at the same time, where's the line where you just say, well, I've protested, that's good enough? Where's the actual actions that are taking place so that they say we are going to correct these issues, these systemic issues, and I'm going to put money towards that, and I'm going to be voting people in for that, and I'm going to be doing all these different steps to actually promote change instead of just kneeling, because I get that it raises awareness. The problem right now is that all it's doing is creating hostility, and it's not getting people on board with their issues as much as conversation and dialogue might, and then steps after that, because there is a double-digit drop in ratings, and as you said, a majority of fans don't want to see it. And so the more they do it, the more hostile and dividing it becomes, whereas conversation and dialogue would get people to a point where they can listen to one another and then list out steps to take to start addressing some of these issues.
If I could just comment on two things. The first being, Matthew, that you had mentioned that these athletes can do whatever they want. The reality is they can't. There are rules and regulations put forth in our ability to demonstrate that dictate what is responsible. And I think that's so important because what these athletes are doing is incredibly legal. And then what we're really discussing is whether or not it's A, warranted, or B, the appropriate place to be doing it. But like I said, these athletes are, and I shouldn't just say athletes, coaching staff, owners, any sort of administrative personnel representing these teams, what they're doing is incredibly legal. And they are doing what they should be. No, I know, but it's I just wanted to point out that there are people who do protest and do what they shouldn't be doing while protesting in terms of running people over with cars.
Oh,
for
sure,
example.
sure.
Right.
Yeah, this
So I
is
think
totally
that's-
legal. It's a
and I
very
think,
fine way of protesting.
So going back, they can't do whatever they want, but they are doing what they should be doing and can do. The next thing I was going to point out, you've actually had, I don't want to say both sides, because that really creates an adversarial sort of dynamic, but you've had individuals, especially civil rights advocates, advocating for individuals not to watch the NFL, especially in the wake of Colin Kaepernick not being rehired by a team. But you also have the President of the United States tweeting not to watch the NFL either. So really, in a lot of ways, the NFL is suffering from both sides in terms of viewership, not just because there's one side that disagrees with the NFL. It's also because there's another side that just disagrees with these players, so they just don't want to see it. So I think those are just two important stipulations to point out.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL is what's suffering most from this. It's now you have both. So it was one side, people who agreed with kneeling, also protesting the NFL. And then now it's the opposite. It's just frame transition, this frame alignment of the opposing opinions that are now protesting the NFL because they don't want to see it, because they disagree with these people kneeling. But something that I want to go back to what you said, Matthew, you're kind of taking an objectivist approach to the issue, but what's more important is more of like a subjectivist approach, whereas you talked about voting to get these people who agree with you into office. But until the issue is in the mind of the people and it's in the public via these protests, the issue that they are protesting is not going to be a subject for debate, for people to know if you agree with or disagree with, or be something that people realize that needs to be taken care of, so you can vote for those people that are going to take care of these issues into office. Protesting is so important. It's one of those important things we can do in this country. We are free to do that, and it's a privilege. So that's where there's no way that I would say I would disagree with them, because look back to civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed because he was the biggest face of that movement, right? And we can all agree now, looking back, that he was a great guy, a great human being.
He's a great dude.
Great dude. He was an amazing human being. A patriot. One of the greatest Americans of all time. But he was shot and killed because what he was doing was rattling the cages. He was not a well-liked man among many people who disagreed. So
Especially those in power, I might add.
Yeah. So you have to, when something is wrong in your country, you have to protest, you have to stand up, and you've got to piss some people off who disagree. You know you're getting somewhere protesting when people disagree. When people are mad at you, you know you're getting somewhere.
I think, yes, valid point. At the same time, where does the protesting stop and conversation start? Because what I see is that
is it protesting a form of conversation?
Not something that moves you into a space where you can actually do work.
I would
work
say
together.
that what we're doing right now is pretty indicative of conversation from protest. I think that these athletes have definitely accomplished the preliminary objective of their mission, which is to foster a dialogue. If these athletes didn't do what they were doing, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Mm-hmm. Because in a way, the four of us acknowledge exactly why these athletes, coaching staff, just these individuals on the field are doing what they're doing. We acknowledge why. And I think in a lot of ways, what the conversation really needs to be about is why they're doing what they're doing. But until that happens, people can discuss the legality or the morality of kneeling, standing, linking arms, not being on the field during the national anthem. But the point is they have fostered a dialogue. And I think it's up to those who really acknowledge why they're doing it to move and shift that dialogue, not from the national anthem, but to what these people are doing this for. So I think that's where the conversation really needs to be headed.
Because police brutality and issues of systemic racism were not as prominent in conversation as they are now. And that's the biggest thing that they were trying to accomplish, and they've done that.
I mean, I would say since really 2016, when Donald Trump really came into the world stage as well, have people been talking
But even
about,
more so now.
now that he's in power by absolutely.
Yeah, but I would say the systemic racism aspect of it, yes, it's a big conversation. And Donald Trump's a huge reason for that. But I think that these protests, people who aren't even NFL fans are talking about it, which is...
Like me.
Yeah, like, Will, you never watch football.
I know nothing about football.
Exactly, but you're talking about this issue because it's an important issue. That's it. And this is beyond football.
Yeah,
it's not even any...
Right.
It's nothing is about football, right?
So off that point, a lot of people I've listened to that are against these protests will use that to say, you're right, it's not about football. We want to get it back to about football. And I understand that these people they're in a limelight. This is their platform, right? Like LeBron James, if he weren't a basketball player, might not have the platform that he has as an NBA player.
Sure.
Yep.
So I get that they're utilizing that platform, but at the same time, I've heard, and this is not my point of view, this is just what I've heard in conversation with people that are on the other side of things, and that they turn on an NFL game to watch an NFL game.
Sure.
And it's just about football.
Well, what's the national anthem about then? The national anthem before a football game is not about football.
Yeah. The national anthem has really politicized football, I would say.
Yeah, it was never about... The national anthem... If you go to a baseball game and you're listening to the national anthem, you're not thinking about... The national anthem there is not about baseball, just like the national anthem before a football game is not about football.
Wasn't the national anthem initiated in football games like in 2009 or something like that? Something that's really recent. I should say to the grand scale that we see it today. They implemented it beginning, under 10 years ago as a marketing campaign to make our athletes look more patriotic, to make the NFL look more patriotic. And, of course, we could dive into the actual legality of hoisting this massive, massive flag onto the field, which is actually against the code of the flag or the flag code, but no one seems to talk about that. And no one seems to talk about how when I watch a football game at my house, I never stand up during the national anthem, just because, I don't know, I'm in the comfort of my own home with some guacamole and some chips and a nice crisp can of
When you're not
Diet
actually
Coke.
watching the NFL game.
I know, I can't remember the last time I watched an NFL game, but now that Netflix is out, that's a different conversation.
No, most definitely. Look, we're nearing 25 minutes on this podcast, and we don't want it to go too long. We could talk for hours about this, but I just want to go around one last time and just state why you agree or disagree with again. And just to show that we had this very peaceful conversation, which the protests inspired.
Well, they can't see it, but I'm currently choking Dezmond.
That's why I haven't said anything for like the last 5 minutes.
No. Look, this is what needs to happen. More of this needs to happen. And I'm not going to say we're the biggest platform out there. We are quite a small platform. But the more conversations like this that happen, the further along in the process we can get to unity, or as close to unity as we can get. Does anyone have any last thoughts?
I would just like to say that for a righteous cause, a morally upright cause, like combating systemic inequality, like raising awareness for police brutality, the right to demonstrate is so important right now. And the fact that individuals are doing it peacefully is extra important, an extra caveat. And this conversation is so important. And I think we need to shift the conversation from the national anthem to what is really beneath the surface of what we see. And that's why these individuals are doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Agreed.
That's where the conversation needs to head.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think if these demonstrations continue, it will head that way.
Yep.
So I'm optimistic.
The more and more
for
we
these
don't
people.
talk about the actual issue and we talk about the anthem, the more and more racism wins.
Right.
And I'll say, on my side, I think that it's. I mean, from my side, it's the same thing. The more and more we focus on the anthem, the more and more, in my opinion, these protests continue, the more it will continue to focus on the anthem, because you just can't not focus on it when that's what they're kneeling during. And so I think that people need to move away from these protests and into dialogue that is going to actually get something done.
Yeah, so I think we've talked here for 25 minutes or whatever, and we haven't really even scratched the surface of this.
For sure.
I think there's so much more that we can continue to go into as the days go on and this issue continues to progress, even though from last Sunday's NFL game, it looks like, or NFL games, I should say, it looks like this issue is starting to die out a little bit. Maybe that's a little bit because it had kind of died out prior to the president talking about it, and he hasn't talked about it as recent. I think really Will kind of hit it on the head when he said, it's definitely legal to do. And so it comes down to, we can talk about, is it warranted and is it in the proper manner? And I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's definitely warranted. Racial inequalities exist in this country. However, it comes down to the manner in which the protest exists. And, I still think it's a disrespectful manner that it's occurring in. And I think that you could gain as much traction if they kneeled before the anthem, like the Cowboys did, or if they all came out and they wore some kind of a black armband or something like that. They would still gain amount of traction, and people would still be talking about it. And so I think it really comes down to that this is a disrespectful way, in my eyes and in the eyes of, I think, many Americans, most Americans from the polls, of protesting. But I think they have every right to do that. And also, I just want to add in here, the president called for, I'd be interested to hear your guys' opinion on this too. He called for the NFL to fire those that are protest during the anthem. They said that he should stand. First of all, I want to say I don't agree with the president speaking out for this.
Or against this.
Or against this more so. I think he obviously has better things to do. But also he legally can speak out because he obviously has First Amendment rights. Sure. But I think that he has better things to talk about. But I'm curious what you guys think about if the NFL were to fire these players. Because I think legally, from what my understanding is, the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment, they apply to the government more so. They don't apply to private businesses. So that's why you can be fired for your or by your employer for doing something that they disagree with or that they deem isn't a good representation of their company or their organization. Yep. So I'd be curious what you guys would think about that, if it's legally standing and if it's something they should do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's no surprise that I would say, of course, individuals who practice and observe their constitutional rights shouldn't be fired. And in a way, as infuriating and as maddening as it is to read the president's tweets, you have to realize the bigger picture in the sense that President Donald Trump just so embodies that inequality that exists, that just like lack of understanding and lack of empathy for individuals who really are representing a cause so much greater than what we see every Sunday. So yeah, that was my thing.
So you think they should not be fired? Yeah.
No,
Matthew.
Donald Trump has built a reputation on firing people, whether that be on his reality show or in his own administration. So it's no surprise that he's calling for people to be fired.
Sure. Matthew?
Yeah, I think that's a silly request as well. They have every right to say what they want to say, kneel during the anthem. They have those rights. I think with Dez, if it's a private business or contractual or in their contract, if for some reason it's stated you can't kneel during the anthem. I don't know why they would do that. But if it was in the contract and something like that, or, I don't know. If something like that were to come up, then maybe there would be an issue. But to just say, well, they kneeled, so they need to be fired is really eliminating what we are about in America.
For sure. I definitely wholeheartedly disagree. They should not be fired. I don't see that happening at the NFL stage, but I think things will happen when more college students, with more high school students start to kneel at the anthem, when you start getting benched or removed from the team. That's where we're going to get into those. I mean, that's going to get into more deeper conversations about this, and we'll see how that plays out legally, because I don't have the answers. I'm not a lawyer. You're a future lawyer, Des, but not yet, and none of us are, but I just want to thank everyone. That was a really interesting last topic that we could also talk for another half hour. But thank you, Will and Dezmond, for coming on the show. It has been a fun time. And Dezmond, you're right. We only scratched the surface. But the point of this was not to totally describe and explain the issue, because no one has all the answers, but just to talk about it in a peaceful way. This has been Sean
and Matthew
from the booth. Conversation as it should be.
And I'm Sean Zimney. Thank you so much for being on. To my right.
That was Will. This has been the booth. Conversation as it should be. Thank you guys so much for coming on, and we will be with you next time.